Just a few words of thanks before the final blessing. Thank you to Father Shawnee for the wonderful services we've had, to all the staff in this Clare nursing home, Mrs. Smith and her staff. Nurse Maureen held Maureen's hand when she died at 9:30 yesterday morning. The phrase she used was, she went out like a light. It was a very sudden end to a traumatic week. And especially to Anne and Monica for their care and their kindness. She regarded Anne and Monica part of her family in those ailing days. To Dr. Billy O'Connor. Dr. Billy O'Connor also a significant part of her life in those final 2 years. The burden always falls unevenly when somebody gets ill late in life, and the Clare members of the family really worked very hard and came to the fore. Bridie and Mick and the three Kennelly boys, Jared and Pat and Michael and John, Joe and Mary, of course, and Teresa. But the townspeople, I think every one of the townspeople of Miltown did something and thought nothing of it for Maureen in those final years. Maureen MacMahon, for those who didn't know her, was born the 21st of March in 1920, a very, very turbulent time. It was the middle of the War of Independence. I think Terence McCurtain was shot the day before. It was 18 months away from the ceasefire, the treaty, and she died just a few days after her 87th birthday, a few days ago, April the 5th, 2007. She was the eldest in the family of MacMahons from Cloghaunmore. Cloghaunmore is just off the Ina Road, for those who don't know. It's actually on the old Ina Road before arterial drainage was invented. Maureen came first, then Peggy, God rest her soul, she died in 1996, Kathleen, and then John Joe, who is married to Mary, Bridie, who's married to Nick Kennelly, and Anne, who is married to Paddy Corry, Paddy, who was married to Molly Byrne, and of course there is another member of the family, PJ, who was a brother, effective brother as well, who lived with the MacMahons and managed to get the last seat on the famous Aer Lingus A330 back to Shannon the other day. He's come from New York for this occasion, and it gave everyone a lift to hear PJ was on his way, as it always does. My name is Eoghan Corry. I'm Maureen's nephew. I'm honoured to speak on behalf of the family, as I was honoured to have Maureen as my aunt. She had 19 nephews and nieces, and she was a woman who rigorously remembered your birthday. We always had cards, we always had gifts. She loved small children. She was a larger-than-life woman in all our childhoods, towering over everything else. Family occasions, she was always there, and it's passed on to the next generation because she now has 39 great-nephews and nieces. And that counts PJ's Michael and Nuala and their grandchildren as well as that figure, because she would have counted that in. The 40th hopefully is due in 2 weeks' time. Maureen was a great woman for the lotto. She played the lotto every week, and although she never won it, she spent every cent of those winnings. Every week she'd pick out how much she was going to spend and how she was going to spend it, and a lot of that was going to be spent on her 19 nephews and nieces, on her 39 great grand-nephews and grandnieces. I think, the lotto slogan is, if you're not in, you can't win. We were all in while Maureen was there. Sign of the underlying generosity that was always there. She was a great woman for a party. Twinkling eyes that Father Shawnee remarked upon were always part of our lives. When I was communicating with my siblings and some of the cousins, the word they kept using was laughter. Laughter is what we associate with Maureen, and we're going to miss that laughter. Danny Boy was her song, and if anyone cared to mention De Valera or in latter years Margaret Thatcher, she'd argue all night. She loved discussion, she loved debate, she loved all of that. Cloghaunmore was special to her. If anyone remembers the stifling hot summer of 1975, when London choked with the heat, Maureen wrote letters back saying her cure for coping with the heat was to imagine she was on the hill of Cloghaunmore with the breeze blowing through her. And when the door began to close, and that wonderful, wonderful mind and her ability to communicate with those on the outside of it, it was largely back to Cloghaunmore that she went. She talked about the horses, she talked about the children that she played with. She was a little girl with red hair and a ferocious temper when she was small. Her father used to compare her with the most famous of the MacMahon ancestors, Máire Rua. And if I can tell an irreverent, Máire Rua's most famous accomplishment, this is a bit irreverent for the surroundings we're in, was to marry a Cromwellian soldier and remove his manhood on the wedding night. It was the highest honour you could pay, was to compare somebody with a Morlarua. Cloghaunmore was a very special place. 7 Malleys in one family, 11 Malleys in another. You had Crawfords, you had 5 different families of Griffins in Cloghaunbeg, and childhood games. Maureen's mind closed down. That's what she talked about. She talked about Cloghaunmore, that idyllic childhood that she had. Maureen was typical of that generation, that independence generation. She went first of all to Dublin, then to London. She immigrated to Luton originally in 1944 and then on to London. Spent a lot of her life there, worked in the English Civil Service and came back to Dublin, and then came back to Miltown, Malbay, to Church Street, where she was found the sort of welcome that this parish should be extremely proud of. She came right back into the heart of the community. She experienced the warmth and the generosity which she in turn had been exposing towards people when she was in Cricklewood. It was always a friendly house, it was always a centre for those of us who were growing up when we went to England. Maureen having to go away was the tragedy of the generation. It's a wonderful thing to see that her grandnieces and grandnephews are now growing up close to their grandparents. She was a member of a generation which all of you here would be familiar with, a generation that was selfless in what they gave, and they didn't enjoy great material benefit, and they really didn't get much thanks for it. But I'd like to say, for my generation and the generation that came after me, there are these selfless people. I see them in every aisle of this church today who deserve that thank you for what they did and what they went through, so that others may come to enjoy the fruits of their work. She didn't like being the centre of attention. Even getting a family photograph of Maureen was a big deal. She did not like having her photograph taken, so she's going to pop out of the box now and tell me to stop talking about her. The family would like you, if you have the time, to come back to the Armada after the graveyard. We'd like to spend some time, have a proper talk with you and hear more stories about Maureen. At the end of Maureen's visits, we would see her off in the airport. We'd go into the wonderful Michael Scott designed old Dublin airport, and there would be tears as we said goodbye to her. And we'd watch every inch of the way as she went out to the airplane. And in some ways, that's what we're doing today. We're going to see every inch of the way. When she went away, there was a sense that the laughter was still with us and would be back the following summer and would be back the following Christmas. She would come back to visit again and the laughter would be back, but that's still the case here. In our memories, Maureen's laughter will always be with us. I think we should toast Maureen and say thank you, Maureen, for being such a large part of our lives, and wish her well onto the party wherever she's going to now. It's going to be a far livelier place as soon as she arrives. Thank you very much.